At Team Toyota, they've been selling and servicing new and used Toyotas in your community for over 50 years. And you can reserve your next new Toyota with them today. You'll get a realistic timeline, and even in this crazy market, they won't charge you over MSRP. Or don't wait at all. With over 75 certified Toyotas, including a bunch of RAV4 and Highlanders, you can drive one home today. And you can always trust them to maintain your current vehicle. Their service and collision centers are high-tech, comfortable, and will save you time and money. Team Toyota can help you go anywhere you want, but they'll always be your hometown team. Just visit teamtoyota.net and choose from 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. Hey folks, this is an emergency edition of the Phillies Talk podcast with Jim Salisbury and Corey Seidman. We're coming at you with this emergency pod because 2+ years into his Phillies managerial tenure, Joe Girardi has been fired as Phillies manager, the move coming prior to the start of their 3-game home series with the Los Angeles Angels. At 2 p.m., there's going to be a press conference on NBC Sports Philadelphia, on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, and our YouTube channel, streaming live with Dave Dombrowski. Comments from him and the interim manager for the rest of the 2022 season, which is Rob Thompson. So, Jim, just what's your initial reaction to this move coming on June 3rd?
Yeah, June 3rd is a key date in all of this because they have 4 months remaining in their season, and that's kind of what they're looking to do is save their season. You have a very high payroll of over $230 million, club record. Over the luxury tax for the first time, huge commitment on the part of ownership. You have a 10-year postseason drought that is frustrated the fan base, the front office, ownership. Everybody's angry about it. They're desperate to break that 10-year drought. You have a clubhouse and a lineup and a team that is underperforming. So big expectations with some of the guys you brought in and spent all that money on. Underachievement and plenty of season left. You can't fire the players. So what you do is you try to change the leadership, change the tone, change the voice, and see if you can get this thing straightened out for 4 months and get this high-priced team where it wants to go. The postseason, they're facing a humongous deficit in the National League East. It's going to still take a lot of work to make this up, but they're banking on that maybe a change in manager, a change in voice is the thing that can get this team going. Joe was here for, it was only a 60-game season in 2020. Last year they finished a game over 500, just over 500, and missed the playoffs 2 years in a row, and they're facing a 12-game deficit now. It's just when all those factors come in, high prices on personnel, underachievement on the roster, and just the fact that Joe looks a little beaten up by all this losing. He just is a guy who's, came here with a winning pedigree, used to winning, and it just never happened. So you roll the dice that a managerial change can get you there because you can't fire all the players. I mean, managers get fired because the players get them fired. That's why managers get fired in every sport. It's because the players don't play good enough to make the manager look good. When they play good, they make the manager look good. Ask Charlie Manuel. He'll be the first to tell you that over that 5-year run, he had great players. They made him look good. He's always shown them that type of respect. But, there was underachievement, underperformance, whatever you want to call it. They was sleepwalking through games. The losing was beating this team up and grinding them down. And it gave the front office really no choice to play the one card they could play. Try for a new voice because you can't get rid of all the players.
This has to be a very disappointing day for John Middleton, given the fact that when the exploration began for the next manager after Gabe Kapler was fired, they identified a couple of veteran managers and Joe Girardi and Buck Showalter who had success, who had led their teams to the playoffs, who had these strong resumes, and Girardi wasn't able to get the Phillies over the hump. I mean, they really didn't improve from 2019 to 2020 to 2021. Yes, they inched forward incrementally, but it wasn't nearly enough, especially with, as you mentioned, the $230+ million payroll. There were high expectations on this team. And to be 12 games back in the NL East, to already be trailing 9 teams in the wild card race, there have been a lot of people asking lately, what can the Phillies do to shake this up? Do you think that a change in manager can have that sort of impact?
I think that's what this is, a shakeup. You have to grab people by the lapels and say, this cost somebody, your play cost somebody his job. I mean, granted, there were decisions that didn't work for Joe, but all in all, I still put this on the players, and but it is up to the manager to get those players to perform to their capabilities. And honestly, I just haven't seen that happen here in his tenure. So I don't know if it can make a difference. I think short term, I think you'll see a bump in intensity, and that's a good thing. I thought we saw a little bump in intensity on Wednesday night when, ironically, they won their final game under Joe. But Rob Thompson, who comes in at the as the interim, and with Joe being gone, that's not going to improve the defense. It's still a very faulty defensive team. You could say that last 7-game road trip, and maybe even a little bit before that, cost Joe his job. The last kind of couple weeks when the losing, just mounted, and the defense was the big reason for the losses. There were 3 ball games they should have nailed down in the 9th inning, but either the closer let it get away, or and the defense along the way. I've never seen such bad outfield defense play as I saw on that 7-game trip last week through Atlanta and New York, and that all kind of conspired against Joe. So he came here. I was excited when they hired him. I thought they made a great move. I mean, they interviewed Dusty Baker, who's continued to have success with a great roster down in Houston. They interviewed Buck Showalter, who has turned things around with the Mets. And the Mets, running away with this thing is another thing that's conspired against the Phillies and increased their desperation here to make a move. But I thought Joe would have more of an impact. I really did. And in the end, it was kind of just everything was kind of neutral. I thought he would have more of a leavening effect on that clubhouse. I just thought he'd have a more of a leavening effect on bringing a winning environment and getting this team out of this cycle of losing that it's stuck in. And in the end, the cycle of losing gobbled up another manager, in Joe Girardi. I think he's a good baseball man. I really do. I think he's a great baseball man. I think he's a great guy. Did he make mistakes? Every manager makes mistakes. You can think out every move in your mind, every strategical move, every strategic decision. And it's up to the player to execute it. And if the player doesn't execute it, the manager looks bad. You could make a decision that on paper is horrible. You can say, why would you make that decision? And if the player goes out and execute it, you look like a genius. There weren't enough of those moments here. So it doesn't surprise me that they're playing this card. They're desperate. Like I said, big payroll, big star talent, underachievement, 4 months left. You give it a shot that this might work, that the shock value of it all might get these guys out there and turn it around and try to win some ball games. There were things that, like, the injuries really conspired against Joe. They lost Harper. He's only half a player now. He's DH and he can't play the field because he can't throw. That's really hurt their outfield defense, because you went out in the offseason, the front office signed 2 guys that profile as DHs, hoping that one would be the DH, one you could survive as defense in the outfield in Schwarber and Castellanos. Now you have to play both defensively, and they're not producing with the bats. So, that's on the front office. That was their design. That wasn't necessarily Joe's design. They were supposed to hit over all these defensive shortcomings, and they have not. And ultimately, the manager pays the price. But I do agree that sometimes you just need to change the vibe. You need to change the voice. You need to change the direction. You need to take a chance that something's going to work. And it becomes easier when the manager is in the last year of his contract, as Joe was. They did not pick up his option previous to the season, going into the season. I think that can compromise his authority in the clubhouse. At least, how seriously the guys take their manager when they see that the front office didn't even extend them. So maybe that played a role in some of the uninspired play. I don't know, but now it's, Rob Thompson gets a chance to try to connect with that room, and manager's job, put the players in a position to succeed. And if they succeed, they usually get the credit. If they don't, you get fired. So now it's his time.
So the Phillies still have 111 games left this year, but in about 4 months, they're going to have to put together another search for their new skipper. And when you look at the recent managers, there have been several different personality types. There's been the Gabe Kapler. There's been Joe Girardi, who was more of a blend of analytics than Kapler was, when Kapler skewed farther that way. The Phillies, when they searched for and ended up hiring Girardi, it seemed like the goal was to get an experienced manager. You wonder, is that still the priority now, given the way that the Phillies really haven't been able to solve things by picking the skipper?
Well, I don't I don't know what the priority. The priority right now is to try to turn it around over the final of 111 and games here, and then you have a different guy picking the manager now. They have a lot of trust in Dave Dombrowski. He did not pick Joe. I think that was more or less an ownership call, and I don't blame them for being impressed by Joe and wanting to see if Joe could come in here and put his winning touch on things. So I don't know which way Dombrowski will go. I'm sure his eyes are open. He made a hell of a hire in Hora up in Boston. Young, bright, relates to young players, analytically inclined, Latin American. I think he maybe something out of that template might be something they have their eyes on. Couple things here. Organizations aren't developing managers anymore, it seems like. There was always that manager in waiting that you were developing in the minor leagues. These modern front offices have taken so much of the managerial duties away from the manager, and everything's so scripted at the minor league level. You must play this guy. You must employ this strategy, pitch this guy. So, are managers really being developed in the minor leagues in terms of running a game and running a clubhouse, or are they being big-footed by by their player development staffs who are answering to their front offices who are very analytically inclined? A guy like Charlie Manuel learned to manage in the minor leagues. Learned to deal with personalities in the minor leagues, and it just seems like that is disappearing. Brian Snitker, the same thing down in Atlanta. So I don't know which way they're going to go with their next manager. But there's one thing I want to add. This firing of Joe Girardi, these struggles that this team is off to, it is organizational. It is systemic. It's not on Joe. I mean, he parachuted in a couple of years ago, and there were times, I remember asking him a couple of years ago after they had that horrible doubleheader up in Buffalo, and they couldn't get anybody to throw the ball over the plate. Like, Joe, what are you going to do here? How much is this, weighing on you? Because you came from an organization that fixed these things, the Yankees, and the Phillies just, and sometimes they don't fix their problems. And they went out and got Castellanos and Schwarber, and a few years ago they got Harper, and they got nothing to show for it. And the reason they had to go out and write those big tickets is not because they're not good players and anybody wouldn't want them, but you'd rather be in a situation where you're going out and signing that one free agent to augment a roster that you have built, developed, and taken to the major leagues that's young and ready to win. That that last little ingredient to get you over the top. Instead, they have to sign their entire outfield and the bulk of their lineup to bring them in from the outside because they've failed in the draft, because they've failed in player development. You look at their drafts since 2015. In the first round, they took an outfielder, Cornelius Randolph. They took an outfielder, Mickey Moniak. They took an outfielder, Adam Hazley. And none of them have impacted at the major league level. So you have to go out and spend all this money on these guys who have track records from other towns and try to meld them together as a team. And a lot of that falls on the manager. And sometimes that just doesn't click. All those personalities, all those guys from the outside take a while to click. Next thing you know, you're 12 games behind the Mets. So a lot of this, Joe is wearing it because the organization hasn't drafted and developed a group and a nucleus that can sustain and win at the big league level. Now you're going to go out and sign from outside the organization. The talent doesn't come together. They don't play well. They have defensive shortcomings. They're only half a player because they're offensive players, not defensive players. They don't hit. Boom, you're up the up the creek without a paddle, and you're headed home. So that's baseball. There's no substitute for drafting good players, developing good players, getting them here. Joe's firing to me is just another example or another manifestation of an organizational failure here.
And all of those reasons that you just outlined explain how a team with a $230 million payroll can be mired in this sort of mediocrity from year to year. All right, that's going to do it for this Emergency Phillies Talk podcast. Joe Girardi is out as Phillies manager. We'll have wall-to-wall coverage on it all day long on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. And at 2 p.m., there will be the live press conference that we're streaming on the website, on the channel, and on our YouTube channel. Dave Dombrowski addressing the firing of Joe Girardi and interim manager Rob Thompson also speaking. Thanks for listening. Catch you soon.